Okay.
Welcome back, students. This is the lecture for subject Business Economics for BCom first sem. So, in our previous lecture, we have started with the chapter Indifference curve. Thereby, we have learned the meaning and the concept of indifference curve. We have seen the definition of indifference curve. Then, we have understood the schedule and the graph of indifference curve. Today, what we are going to see is the concept of indifference map and the assumptions of indifference curve. If I talk about the concept of indifference map, so it is important from the point of view of examination as well, because it is a question which can be asked for the 4 marks. So let's begin with the concept of indifference map. What is basically the indifference map? So, indifference map is the family of indifference curves, which means indifference map is the set of indifference curve. In previous lecture, we have seen that indifference curve is the locus of the point which shows the combination of different combinations of two commodities giving equal satisfaction to the consumer. That is known as indifference curve. So, when single indifference curve is drawn containing the various combinations which gives equal satisfaction to the consumer, so it is termed as indifference curve. But when many indifference curves are drawn, then it is known as indifference map. Like, if I talk about the indifference curve that we have seen in the previous lecture as well. So what we have seen here, the combination of the various commodities, various combination of the two commodities giving equal satisfaction to the consumer. And when we have plotted this combinations on the graph, so it has given us the indifference curve. Okay. Now, the thing is that when there may be many such combinations which can be plotted on the different indifference curves. And when many curves are plotted on this single graph, many indifference curves containing the combinations of the two commodities is plotted on a graph giving different level of satisfaction to the consumer, then it is known as indifference map. See, here it is the IC1, that is indifference curve 1, that we have drawn on the basis of this schedule which I have explained in the previous lecture. Now here you can see another indifference curve is drawn above this curve, and it is said that the higher indifference curve gives higher level of satisfaction. So why it is so? Why does it happen? Why the higher indifference curve gives the higher level of satisfaction? Because when higher indifference curve is a curve which contains the combinations of the two commodities, but the amount of the commodities which are lying on the higher indifference curve are more. Like, this is the indifference curve whereby there are 15 biscuits and 1 chocolate in the combination A. So what could happen on IC3, that is on higher indifference curve, there may be the combination where the amount of either biscuit or chocolates may be higher than this combination. Like, if I talk about the combination A on indifference curve on IC3, on indifference curve 3, so there may be 17 biscuits and 1 chocolate. So when we talk about the higher indifference curve, so higher indifference curve is a curve which contains the different combinations of the two commodities which gives higher satisfaction to the consumer. And why does it give higher satisfaction to the consumer? Because it contains the more amount of the commodity. It may contain the more amount of either biscuit or chocolate, or it may contain the more amount of both biscuits and the chocolate. And as there are more amount of the goods there are more amounts of the goods in the combination, therefore it gives higher satisfaction to the consumer. So from this one thing can be understood that the consumer is indifferent towards the combination which are lying on the same indifference curve. Why it is so? Because the combinations which are lying on same indifference curve gives equal level of satisfaction. Therefore, the consumer is indifferent towards any combination which are lying on same indifference curve. But if we talk about the combination of the different indifference curve, so consumer has the preference. If the consumer is given option to choose the combination lying on either IC1 or IC3, so he will definitely go for the combination lying on IC3. Lying on IC3, that is the higher indifference curve. Why? Because the combinations which are lying on the higher indifference curve will be giving higher level of satisfaction as they possess more amount of goods in the combination. So therefore, the consumer is indifferent towards the various combination on same indifference curve, but the consumer is not indifferent towards the combination on different indifference curve. He will always prefer to have the combination which are lying on higher indifference curve, because the combination on higher indifference curve provides higher level of satisfaction. So I hope you are clear with the concept of the indifference map. What is basically the indifference map? Indifference map is the family of indifference curve. It is a set of indifference curve which consists of the various indifference curve, and the consumer is indifferent towards the combination lying on different indifference curve because the higher level of satisfaction is given by the higher indifference curve. Okay, so I hope now it is clear to you. Now we will see the assumption of indifference curve. So first assumption is rationality. See, in the indifference curve technique, it is assumed that the consumer is a rational person and the available resources with the consumer is limited in amount. So consumer will always prefer the combination which can maximize his satisfaction with the given amount of resources, that is the income of the consumer and the market price of the commodity. So being a rational consumer will always prefer the combination which will maximize his satisfaction. The next one is ordinal utility. So indifference curve technique is based on the assumption of ordinal utility. Here, in order to determine the utility, we give the preferences or order. Like there are two fruits, that is apple and banana. So here the utility cannot be measured like by having the one apple I get 8 utility, by having the 2 apples I get 6 utility. No, in this way utility is not measured here. Here the utility is given the preferences or order. So here I may give the first rank, second rank, etc. Like here I can say I like apple more than banana, or I like banana more than apple. So here I give rank, like first rank to apple as I like apple more, second rank to banana as I like banana but less than the apple. So here the concept of ordinal utility is used. So law of indifference curve is based on the assumption of ordinal utility, and the commodities or the combinations are given the preferences, are given the order as per the level of satisfaction received, as per the level of satisfaction achieved. Next one is non-satiety. So the assumption of non-satiety states that the consumer is indifferent towards the various combination lying on same indifference curve, but he is not satisfied till the time he doesn't get the maximum level of satisfaction. Therefore, the consumer will always prefer the combinations lying on higher indifference curve if he is given option to choose between the combination lying on the lower indifference curve and the higher indifference curve, because the combination on higher indifference curve carries the more amount of goods, and as the consumer is not satisfied till the time he receives the maximum satisfaction, so he will always prefer the combination having the more goods as to the combination having the fewer goods. So it is also based on the assumption of non-satiety. The next one is consistency. So the assumption of consistency states that even though there are various combinations on the same indifference curve giving same level of satisfaction, but still if the consumer chooses combination A over combination B, so for a particular period of time the consumer will continue with the combination A. He will not change his preference to the combination B for a particular period of time. Means he is going to continue the combination that is chosen at the initial stage. He will not change his decision for the particular period of time. So this is known as consistency, and the assumption of consistency is one of the important assumption in indifference curve technique. The next one is transitivity. I hope you all have cleared the 10 standard, so you must understand the concept of transitivity. So what does basically mean by transitivity? Transitivity means you must have learned this. A equals to B equals to C. So A equals to C. You must have seen this concept in maths, right? So the transitivity means the indifference curve technique is based on the assumption of transitivity. It means that if the consumer prefers combination A over combination B and combination B over combination C, so definitely the consumer will prefer combination A over combination C. And if the consumer is indifferent towards the combination, like consumer says A equals to B equals to C, so consumer will also say that A equals to C. Combination A and combination C will be equal for consumer, means he is going to be indifferent toward this combination. Or if the consumer is preferring A over B and B over C, so definitely when there is time to choose between the A and C, so consumer will prefer combination A over combination C. So indifference curve is based on this assumption of transitivity. The next one is diminishing marginal rate of substitution. So what is basically the marginal rate of substitution? Marginal rate of substitution means the quantity of commodity that has been sacrificed in order to obtain additional unit or the 1 unit of another commodity. Like in our example, we have seen that at initial stage a person is having 15 biscuits and 1 chocolate, but later on what he is doing, for getting the additional unit of chocolate, that is 1 unit of chocolate, he is sacrificing the 4 biscuits, right? Then in next stage again he wants 1 more unit of chocolate, but now what he is doing, he is sacrificing only 3 units of biscuits for obtaining 1 more chocolate. Then in further stage he is sacrificing only 2 units for obtaining 1 more unit of chocolate, and then he is ready to sacrifice only 1 biscuit for obtaining 1 more unit of chocolate. So due to this tendency of consumer that he is sacrificing less units of the one commodity for acquiring the another commodity, when the units of another commodity is increasing with the consumer, gives rise to the concept of diminishing marginal rate of substitution. So now the question is, why there is diminishing marginal rate of substitution? So it is because of diminishing marginal utility of consumer. What is mean by diminishing marginal utility? Diminishing marginal utility says that, the law of diminishing marginal utility says that when the consumer obtains the additional unit of the same commodity, so the utility that the consumer obtains from the additional units goes on declining. So here the same thing is happening. Earlier when consumer has 15 biscuits and 1 chocolate, so for obtaining 1 more chocolate, the consumer was ready to sacrifice the 4 units. But when he has got 1 more unit of the chocolate and the chocolate has become 2, so for obtaining the third unit, he is ready to sacrifice only 3 chocolates. And then after having the 3 units of chocolate, for having additional unit, that is 4th unit, he is sacrificing only 2 biscuits. And then for having 1 more additional unit, that is 1 more chocolate, he is sacrificing only 1 biscuit. So this way, as the number of chocolate with the consumer is increasing, he is ready to sacrifice less units of another commodity, that is biscuit, to obtain the same unit of chocolate. So due to this applicability of law of diminishing marginal utility, there is diminishing marginal rate of substitution, which is one of the assumptions under the indifference curve. The next one is 2 commodities. So as we have seen that when we talk about the indifference curve technique, so here we are assuming the 2 commodities. We are saying that the consumer is having the option to choose the different combinations which are having the 2 commodities. So in the indifference curve technique, it is assumed that the resources are limited. So the money income of consumer is limited and he has to spend all his income on this 2 commodities. So therefore the assumption of 2 commodities is taken under the indifference curve technique. And the last one is substitutability. So substitutability refers to that the commodities which are being consumed by the consumer is substitutable, means he can either go for biscuit or go for chocolate. So the commodity whichever is being used in the combination is substitutable to each other. Okay. So these are the various assumptions that we have seen under the indifference curve technique. In our next lecture, we will see the properties of indifference curve. Till then, keep studying, stay tuned. Thank you.